Tell you what, that lizard doesn't realise that its Giga Chad feral, wild living friends literally sleep on the road and eat like poisonous spiders. Anyway, Leatherman has seen fit to release a new kind of knife multi-tool. Well, not super new, these have been around for a couple of years now. The Free series debuted this, the T series, and the Free P series. This is of course the K series, kind of replacing the Crater, I guess, in the lineup of Leatherman tools, knives with extra tools sort of hidden in the handles. Not as well hidden on this one, they are quite out in the open and the handle is quite thick. But we're going to check out all those tools and then we're going to see how this guy works as an EDC pocket knife, because it is definitely hitting that same size and feel as a main EDC knife. So we'll see how it does at that too. There'll be steel testing, there'll be all sorts. So hopefully it's an interesting video for you. All right, first of all, we'll do a bit of a tool review. So all the tools fold into the back of the knife handle like so. The Free system uses a series of magnets to stop them from shaking out like that. And to launch them, you basically just run your thumb across this ridge and they will all pop out and then you sort of pick the tool. It's a pretty slick and pretty well engineered solution to the problem of fitting tools in and having them accessible without having them kind of bunch up and mainly get quite stiff, as they often have been known to do on other Leathermans, where you have to really kind of dig for them sometimes. So pretty good mechanism for getting your tools out. You've got a pry bar, which is quite a thick, basically a flat driver, but thick enough to pretty confidently pry with it. And on the edge of that, you've got another sort of package opener edge type deal going on there. This is a pretty good tool. This is something that I will use fairly often to get things apart, get a paint can lid off or something like that. The blade edge here, probably not as much something I'm going to be using on a knife-based tool, but on your sort of smaller knife tools, and it definitely can be something that you get out from time to time and open up a package or something with, bust that little bit of sticky tape under a folded cardboard box lip, that sort of thing. The next tool is an awl, which also has a micro driver on the tip. So it's got an edge along the side of this piece of metal here, and then it's got a fine screwdriver, which is fine enough and flat enough and pointy enough that you can use it to drive through leather. And if you do drive it through leather, you can then use your sewing eye and I guess put two bits of leather together if that's really what you need to do at that minute with your multi-tool. And then we've got a Phillips driver, which also has a bottle opener on the end. So this is a 2.5 dimensional Phillips, as in the shank is wide on this side, but when you turn it around, it's quite thin. It's about a number 2 when you look at it on the top. It's got sort of, not for your really tiny Phillips driver, it's gonna fit most of your Phillips, and that's obviously what they go for a very good reason. 2.5D Phillips drivers, always less preferable to me than the 3-dimensional ones that you get on things like the Super Tool or the Surge, or even better, the Leatherman Center Drive, things like that. Not the Surge, the Super Tool or the Rebar, or the Victorinox Spirit or the Center Drive for sure. But on a knife-based multi-tool, fitting tools into a handle like they're trying to, it's a very clever choice. And then the last tool is a pair of scissors, which are sprung with a fixed spring, so there's no sort of spring hanging out in space here, but they do have a nice wide mouth to them and you can open them up to about yay far. So, for opening, like wrapping a present maybe in your car or something like that on the way to a kid's party, things like that are what I've been known to use these scissors for in the past, and they do a pretty good job of that. They're some of the better multi-tool scissors kicking around. They're sort of bigger, more substantial than the Leatherman Wave scissors. They're better than the Spirit scissors, which have a really tiny little mouth. They do feel, almost on par with like the Surge scissors or some of the better, bigger Leatherman scissors. So pretty happy with all 4 of those tools. And generally as a tool review, I gotta say, if like I was making a Leatherman tool, these are probably the few tools that I would choose as well. Like if I was, had limited space and wanted to think, what are people gonna want apart from a knife, and you really wanna maximize your preference, these are the ones I'd go for a knife-based tool. You could think, oh, what about a saw? But a saw blade would need to be the longest of the tools, so you'd basically be choosing that over scissors, most likely, or you're going to be fattening up this handle even more. And it's already a pretty hefty handle there full of tools. So look, I think this is about the optimal tool selection they could have gone with. I'm glad they didn't put any dumb little files in there or anything like that. Pretty good mix of versatility, but also being compact and still feeling like a pretty functional knife handle. And of course, that brings me to the last tool, which is the knife blade. So the knife blade is in 420 HC. It's in a hollow grind, and it came pretty sharp from the factory. It came like, with a pretty good rudimentary Leatherman factory edge. They usually come pretty good. And look, it's a locking knife blade. It does pretty well. I'm not sure if they tighten these up firmer for Australia, because we have, in the old days, we had some customs nonsense about being able to open a knife with one hand. But that's gone now, but I think it might be something that they might still over tighten their pivots for, because it is quite a tight knife. Now, everything on this knife is supposed to be one hand openable, which you certainly can. You can bust these back tools open with your one hand. So if you're up a ladder holding something else, you can get everything on your free out. Now, the knife blade isn't as great at being one hand openable, and I would have loved to have seen them make this opening hole bigger, even if you added a bit of a bump or added a dual thumb stud or something like that. I get the thumb stud because that does take up blade space, so the opening slot is probably the best solution, but a slightly wider one would be better, because my thumb really needs to be like forced into it, and you can really feel the surface area really kind of pirouetting around the fat of your thumb, making for a little tiny mark, especially with the Torx tightened down as they have been. And obviously I'll loosen that up myself, but so as it came from Leatherman, doesn't feel the most one-hand happy knife blade, whether that's by design or whether that's just, an accident or for misfortune. But what they could definitely do is make the opening hole a little bit nicer to jam your thumb into. Even if you are opening up a slicker knife, still isn't the most comfortable thing in the world.
Gotta chop it up for my kitties, because they got little tiny mouths. They ain't got no big mouth, they got little mouth. Yo, Lemon, you got a little mouth, don't you? Yo just got a tiny little mouth, don't you, Lemon? You want some of this chicken? Yo, kitties want some of this chicken to eat with your tiny mouth?
Alrighty, so we've spoken about the handle tools, and they're all pretty good. We've even spoken a bit about how the knife blade performs. I like the hollow grind, I like the shape and the layout of everything really. It's all pretty good. But on this channel we separate the knife men from the knife boys, and we do some edge testing on it. So we're going to take this and we're going to use the Worksharp professional angled sharpener, and we're going to put a 17-degree bevel on this guy. We're going to sharpen it to a mirror polish, or strop it to a mirror polish, and then we're going to cut twisted sisal rope with it. So this is the test I basically do against most steels, the same angle more or less. They're not all, you can't set your watch to this stuff entirely, but it's definitely a good indication of how long steels last. So we're going to play twisted sisal rope cutty and see how it stacks up against some other steels, which I'll talk about afterwards. Alrighty, so 100 cuts through the rope. With the same edge, you're looking at, that's about very much on the lower end of edge retention. So other steels like S30V will cut usually about 300 times through the rope before it loses its absolute sharpness. And things like K390 up to 800, 900 times. CPM 15V has, with a very specific, very good, very nice edge on it, cut 2,000 times for me through twisted sisal rope. So that's an absolute sort of scale of the universe kind of thing. But yeah, just in general terms, this is definitely in your lower level. It's going to be things like 8CR, 7CR, 13 MOV are going to hold about this long on a pocket knife blade with this geometry as well. So definitely on the lower end of knife edge retention. All right, so the problem with Leatherman's knife-based multi-tool. It's a pretty well executed piece of engineering for sure. It's got some pretty competent tools in the handle there. If you're going to choose 4, these are probably 4 you'd choose. Scissors for sure, especially if they're good scissors. A Phillips head driver, an awl or a punch or just a general hole maker, and then a pry and a fat screwdriver, a fat flat screwdriver. Not bad tool choices. But when you're making it on a platform like this, they are sort of ancillary to the knife blade. So say the T4, that's kind of everything's in balance there, and all the tools are about as small as each other, so therefore the package is about as, about probably a third to 2/3, half the size of this even. And as such, you could carry that and your main pocket knife. This is looking to encroach on your main pocket knife's turf, whilst also doing kind of a T4 job. In fact, it's only 2 tools less than the T4, which is the tweezers and the little file. And I mean, I like the tweezers, but the little file is something that I'd be happy to have gone without anyway. I mean, maybe they could fix a place for tweezers to go on here. That would be kind of cool. But anyway, all that aside, if they're looking to replace my main knife in my pocket, which is the Stretch 2 at the moment, that's the knife I just kind of pick up and meet the day with, they need to be putting a lot better steel in it than this, because the 420HC as a main knife blade steel, it's going to go dull, noticeably, tangibly, quickly. Even for people who aren't doing, nerdy, standardized testing, or as best as I can on their blades. 420HC, the difference between that and even the next tier up of steels is going to be pretty dire. I've talked about my 4 sort of steel types. Really, when you distill all the edge retention stats down, there's about 4 different levels of, I would say, noticeability in a pocket knife, and this guy here is definitely sitting right at the bottom there. And for them to have made their knife-based tool in that, it just really doesn't make sense, especially as I know now that Leatherman has good steels on stock. They're making arcs in MagnaCut, they've got the TTI and the Charge in S30V and 154cm. Look, the MagnaCut is a new steel, I know, and who knows what it's like to machine and manufacture on a pretty big scale. I think Leatherman using MagnaCut is probably one of the wider industrial applications of the steel now, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But we're looking at, perhaps some spare S30V and 154cm sitting around now, if that takes off, as I'm hoping it does, in MagnaCut being their premium steel. So maybe you've got some other really good steels that you can slide into this role. These aren't going to be the biggest sellers, I would imagine. I'd be surprised if these sold anywhere near what a Wave would or a Rebar would or something like that. So why not just experiment in one of those slightly better steels, Leatherman? Why not have these in 154cm, even to begin with? That's a steel that will probably last about twice as long at the edge to your 420HC, which is a great, disposable beater blade, multi-tool steel. The Leatherman Curl 154cm, no worries at all. If I'm going to be using this knife as my main knife, then I'm not expecting it to last a long time, because it's got all this other stuff going on as well. But if I'm carrying this, I'm carrying it focusing on a knife blade, and I'm going to want a better steel in it. So that's the main issue with the K4, and as such, it's certainly in the grand scale of the Leatherman tier list, it certainly brings it down to about a mid to low B tier, I think. There's just a fundamental mix match of materials and purpose there. So that's my thoughts on the tool. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next film. Goodbye.